My nephew stole my credit card, maxed it out, and smirked. You'll just pay it off. You're rich anyway. Instead, I reported it as fraud and let him deal with the consequences. 2 weeks later, he showed up at my door, pale and shaking, holding a court summons. I raised an eyebrow and said, "Hope you saved up for a lawyer." Last month, I was going through my credit card statement as usual. I noticed several charges that didn't make sense: a high-end gaming laptop, a designer watch, and a set of expensive headphones. The total was over $12,000. I knew I hadn't made these purchases. I immediately called my bank to report the unauthorized charges. The representative asked if I had shared my card information with anyone. I hadn't. They then provided the shipping address for the purchases. To my shock, it was my sister's address. Confused and concerned, I decided to visit my sister to find out what was going on. When I arrived, my 20-year-old nephew, Jake, answered the door. I asked to speak with my sister, but she wasn't home. I decided to address the issue with Jake. "Jake, do you know anything about some recent purchases made with my credit card?" I asked. He smirked and said, "Yeah, I used it. But it's no big deal. You can afford it." I was taken aback. "Jake, that's theft. You can't just use someone's credit card without permission." He shrugged. "Come on, uncle. You're doing well. I needed some stuff, and I knew you wouldn't mind." I couldn't believe his audacity. "It's not about the money, Jake. It's about trust and respect." He rolled his eyes. "Whatever. Just pay it off." Feeling a mix of anger and disappointment, I left. I decided to report the charges as fraudulent. The bank assured me they would investigate. 2 weeks later, Jake showed up at my door, looking pale and holding a court summons. "Uncle, I messed up. They're charging me with fraud." I looked at him and said, "I hope you have a good lawyer." He pleaded with me to drop the charges, but I told him he needed to face the consequences of his actions. This situation has strained our family relationships, but I believe it's important to hold people accountable, even if they're family. He stood there, shaking, the court paper in his hand trembling like a leaf. He opened his mouth, probably to say something else, but I stepped back and shut the door in his face. I wasn't ready to listen. Not yet. That night, my sister Laura called me. Her voice was cold. "You really called the cops on your own nephew?" she asked. "He used my credit card without asking." "That's a crime," I said, holding my ground. "He's just a kid," she snapped. "He's 20. That's not a kid. You've always been hard on him." I laughed, bitter. Hard on him? I paid for his first semester of college, bought him his first car, let him stay at my cabin for free last summer. And this is how he thanks me. She didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then, she tried a softer tone. "Can't we just handle this in the family?" "No," I said. "Not this time." Next day, I got a call from the detective handling the case. They had video footage of Jake picking up the packages from his front porch. Clear as day. Smiling like it was Christmas morning. They were adding another count: identity theft. That same afternoon, my brother-in-law, Laura's husband, called. I hadn't spoken to him in a while. He always kept to himself, didn't like drama. "You really pressing charges?" he asked. "Already did." He sighed. "Look, I don't like what Jake did. Not one bit. But Laura's falling apart. She's scared he's going to get a record. Can't you do something?" "I'm not dropping the case." "I'm not asking you to," he said. "But can you come talk to him? Maybe if he hears it from you again, face to face, without anger, he'll get it." I agreed to meet. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to see if Jake had really understood what he'd done. Maybe I wanted to see fear in his eyes for once. When I walked into their house, the tension hit me like a wall. Laura sat on the couch, arms crossed, lips pressed tight. Jake stood near the hallway, hands stuffed in his hoodie pocket, eyes down. I sat across from him. "You think I enjoy this?" I asked. He didn't answer. "You think I like watching my sister fall apart because her son decided to steal from me?" Still no answer. I could have let it slide. That's true. I could have paid the bill and said nothing. But what would that teach you? "I made a mistake," he muttered. A mistake is spilling coffee on someone's rug, I said. This was a choice. A long one. You bought the stuff. You entered my card info. You waited for packages. You kept them. That's not a moment of weakness. That's days of lying. He looked up, and for the first time, I saw something different in his face. Not just fear. Shame. Then, Laura broke. He said you gave him the card, she blurted. He told us you offered to buy him the laptop for school. I stared at her. Are you serious? That's what he told us, she shouted. Jake didn't deny it. He just stared at the floor. You lied to your parents too? He mumbled something, I couldn't hear it. I said, you lied to your parents too? Yeah, he said. Quiet. Now I was the one who couldn't speak. I left. 3 days later, I got served. Not court papers, subpoena. Jake's lawyer was trying to turn it into a misunderstanding. Said I'd implied permission. Laura must have found a lawyer for him after all. Paid with what, I don't know. Now I'm part of a civil suit. They want to force me to drop the fraud charges and say it was all a miscommunication. I refused. The lawyer warned me, if it goes to court, my personal finances, spending habits, and even my relationship with Jake could get dragged into the open. I said, let's go to court. A week later, a friend of mine who works at the bank told me something that made my blood run cold. Turns out, this wasn't Jake's first time doing something like this. He'd used his ex-girlfriend's debit card a year ago. Never charged, she dropped the case. Said it was just a fight. He's done this before. And now I'm wondering how many other people let it go. Who else did he lie to, smile at, and steal from? And then there was the twist I didn't expect. I got a notice from a collections agency. Apparently, Jake had used my identity to apply for a store credit card 6 months ago. $2,000 owed. That's when I knew this was way deeper than one bad decision. He didn't just screw up. He planned it. Repeatedly. I called my lawyer. We're pressing all charges. Every single one. No mercy. He wants to play games? Fine. I've got time. But now the gloves are off. 3 days after the collections notice, I got another unexpected call. This time it was from a woman named Erin. She introduced herself as Jake's ex-girlfriend. Not the one who dropped the charges last year. A different one. I know we've never met, she said. But I heard what happened with your nephew. I thought you should know. You're not the only one. She told me Jake had also used her identity to open a PayPal credit account. Racked up $3,500 in online sneaker purchases. When she found out, he gaslighted her into thinking it was her fault for leaving her info around. She was too embarrassed to report it. Her credit score tanked. They broke up. I thanked her and asked if she'd be willing to speak to my lawyer. She said yes. I felt sick. Not just for myself anymore. This wasn't just one-time immaturity or desperation. Jake had a pattern. He'd gotten good at it. He knew how to manipulate, how to smile and lie straight to your face. And then the next twist hit. I got a call from my employer's HR department. Someone had submitted an anonymous complaint claiming I was using company time and resources to handle a personal legal vendetta. I was stunned. I had been careful. Never used the office printer, phone, or email for any of it. But still, I was called into a formal meeting. It was awkward and humiliating. They had to review everything, emails, call logs, schedules. It dragged out for days. Guess who had access to my old emails and devices? Jake. I had let him use my spare laptop last year when he was visiting for the summer. I never changed my passwords after. That one's on me. He must have gone digging and forged that complaint to make me look bad. Or maybe he hoped I'd back off if I thought it could cost me my job. Instead, it did the opposite. It lit a fire under me. I changed all my passwords, secured every account, and doubled down. My lawyer filed a full identity theft report across all platforms. We added the PayPal fraud, the store credit card, and even requested a deeper investigation into possible tax fraud, just in case. A few days later, the real hammer dropped. Detectives found out Jake had also used my name to rent a car, then crashed it. They sent the bill to me. $7,800 in damages. When I called the rental agency, they said the driver had presented a photocopy of my license and a fake email address. They had video surveillance from the pickup location. It was Jake. I couldn't speak. My mouth literally went dry on the call. That same night, I drove to my sister's house again, unannounced. When she opened the door, she looked tired. She didn't say anything. "Where is he?" I asked. "In his room." I walked in without waiting. Jake was on his bed, gaming headset on, laughing with someone online. He saw me, froze. "You crashed a car under my name?" I asked. My voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to cut through the air. His face went white. "Uncle." I raised my hand. Don't even try it." Laura came into the room. "What is he talking about?" Jake stood up, stumbling over his words. "I didn't mean to. It was a short rental. I was gonna pay it off. You committed a felony," I said. "Multiple felonies." I panicked, he whispered. "I thought I could fix it before anyone noticed." "You think this is a movie?" I snapped. "This is your life. And mine. You don't get to drag me down with you." Laura looked at Jake like she didn't know him anymore. "You lied to me," she said. "About the card. About everything." He tried to speak again, but she walked out of the room. I followed her into the kitchen. She turned to me. "What are you going to do now?" I stared at her. What I should have done a long time ago. That week, the detective requested a warrant. Fraud, identity theft, impersonation, false documents, and more. Jake's name was on everything now, and I made sure they had everything in place. But just when I thought we had him cornered, he vanished. Didn't show up at his next court date. Laura said she hadn't seen him in 2 days. His phone was off. No one knew where he went. But I had a guess. He had a cousin on his dad's side who lived in Colorado. Shady guy. Had a history of DUIs and skipped out on parole years ago. That's probably where he went. So now there's a bench warrant out for Jake. He's officially a fugitive. And I'm left to keep cleaning up the mess he made with my name. It's not over. But he picked the wrong guy to screw with. It took another 4 weeks, but we found him. Jake had been hiding out in Pueblo, Colorado, with that cousin Derek, the one with the rap sheet. He was using a fake name and working under the table at a used car dealership, staying off the grid, thinking he could disappear until it all blew over. But Jake wasn't smart enough to cover all his tracks. He used the same fake email address he made under my name to sign up for Wi-Fi at Derek's place. The police traced it after subpoenaing records tied to the fraudulent car rental. They picked him up on a rainy Thursday. I got the call around 2 p.m. "We have him," the detective said. "He's in custody. We'll be moving forward with the full charges." I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel. I didn't feel relief. Not right away. Just a deep, burning emptiness. Like I had been holding my breath for too long and forgot how to exhale. The trial took months. Every time I showed up in court, Jake avoided my eyes. Laura came to every hearing, but she never sat beside me again. We didn't speak much anymore. That part hurt in ways I didn't expect. Jake's public defender tried to paint him as a confused young man who made bad choices under pressure. Claimed he was overwhelmed with debt, trying to live up to expectations. Blamed me for spoiling him in the past. I didn't speak until my day on the stand. I told the court how Jake had used my name, stolen my credit, my money, opened accounts, crashed a car, and then tried to destroy my job and reputation to get away with it. I told them how he laughed in my face and said I was rich enough to let it go. I ended with this: sometimes people mistake kindness for weakness. But when someone burns everything you gave them and spits in your face, you don't hand them a lighter, you take the fire away. The jury didn't need long. Jake was sentenced to 6 years. 3 for identity theft, 2 for fraud, 1 for falsifying documents. No parole before year 4. Restitution ordered. He had to pay every cent back, plus interest. After the verdict, he looked at me for the first time in months. His eyes weren't angry. They were hollow. Like he finally understood he wasn't getting out of this. I didn't say anything. I just turned and walked out of that courtroom. But that wasn't the end. The part one never admitted out loud, not to anyone, not even myself, was that I'd made one big mistake too. See, I knew Jake was lazy. I knew he was careless. I saw signs years ago. Borrowed money he never paid back. Lied about stupid things. Little thefts. Manipulating people for favors. And I looked the other way every time. Because he was just a kid. Because I loved my sister. Because it was easier. That silence? That was on me. I let him think he could keep getting away with it. I taught him that there were no consequences in this family. Until he finally pulled the trigger on a fraud so big, it detonated everything. He burned me. But I lit the fuse. Now I live alone. I still have my job. My credit's finally recovering. But family dinners don't happen anymore. Laura sends a card at Christmas. That's it. It's cold and polite and distant. Jake writes sometimes. I don't answer. The last letter he sent, he apologized again. Said he'd changed. Said prison made him realize who he really was. I read it once. Then I shredded it. You don't come back from setting fire to people's lives. You rebuild, maybe. But the scars stay. And for Jake? This time, the price wasn't just mine to pay.